In this episode, we are turning to one of the most practical parts of cybersecurity, because sooner or later every organization has to answer a hard question. What will we do when something actually goes wrong? Security incident response planning and preparation are about building that answer before the pressure, confusion, and time loss of a real event begin to take over. For someone studying for the ISACA Certified Information Systems Auditor (CISA) certification, this topic matters because a strong security program is not judged only by what it tries to prevent, but also by how well it is ready to respond when prevention is incomplete. For a beginner, the big idea is simple and important. Response does not start when an incident happens, because real response quality is mostly determined by the planning, coordination, training, and readiness work that was done well in advance. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is with the difference between a security event and a security incident, because planning becomes much clearer once that line is understood. Organizations see events all the time, such as failed logins, unusual traffic, antivirus alerts, system errors, and strange user behavior. But not every event becomes an incident that demands a formal response. An incident is an event or a connected set of events that threatens confidentiality, integrity, or availability in a way that requires action beyond routine operations. This distinction matters because response planning is not about treating every technical oddity like a crisis, but about creating a disciplined way to recognize when normal handling is no longer enough. A mature organization prepares by defining thresholds, assigning decision authority, and making sure people understand when to escalate instead of guessing under stress or waiting until the damage is too obvious to ignore. Once that distinction is clear, the value of planning becomes easier to appreciate. During a real incident, people are often working with incomplete information, competing priorities, and a growing sense of urgency, which means judgment can easily become rushed or inconsistent. Planning exists to reduce that chaos by deciding in advance who is involved, what matters most, how decisions are made, and what resources are needed to respond effectively. Without planning, even talented technical teams may waste time arguing about ownership, duplicating effort, delaying communication, or taking actions that create more confusion than progress. For a CISA learner, this is an important lesson because audit and assurance work often examine whether management has moved beyond informal confidence and turned incident response into a structured, repeatable capability that can operate under pressure. An incident response plan is the written and agreed-upon framework that tells the organization how it will prepare for, recognize, coordinate, and manage security incidents. The plan does not need to predict every possible attack in exact detail, but it should establish the response model, the roles involved, the escalation paths, and the basic expectations for decision-making and communication. A common mistake is assuming that a plan is simply a long technical document meant for security specialists, when in reality it should support business leaders, legal teams, operations teams, communications staff, and others who may all have important responsibilities when an incident affects the organization. Good plans are therefore clear enough to guide action, broad enough to support different incident types, and practical enough that people can actually use them in a stressful situation. Planning is not about writing for a shelf. It is about creating something that helps the organization think and act coherently when events move quickly. Roles and responsibilities are one of the most important parts of preparation because confusion over ownership is one of the fastest ways to lose time during a serious event. Someone needs authority to coordinate the overall effort. Technical responders need clarity about their scope. Business leaders need to understand when they must be informed, and supporting groups such as legal, human resources, public affairs, privacy, and vendor management may all need to participate depending on the nature of the incident. If those relationships are not defined ahead of time, teams can end up pulling in different directions, with one group trying to preserve evidence, another trying to restore services immediately, and another worrying about notification obligations without a shared picture of the situation. Preparation helps prevent that by defining who leads, who supports, who approves major decisions, and who must be consulted when the incident reaches certain thresholds. From an audit viewpoint, this area often reveals whether accountability is truly established or whether the organization is depending too heavily on informal heroics. Preparation also depends on having a thoughtful classification approach, because not every incident requires the same level of response. An organization may face malware infections, insider misuse, data exposure, denial of service activity, lost devices, unauthorized access attempts, or third-party issues, and each type can involve different risks, stakeholders, and urgency levels. Classification helps responders make sense of what they are seeing and decide whether the problem is minor, serious, or potentially business critical. Severity ratings are useful here because they help connect technical symptoms to business consequences, such as the effect on customer data, financial operations, critical services, regulatory obligations, or executive reputation. A beginner should understand that classification is not just labeling for paperwork, because it influences who gets involved, how fast escalation happens, and whether the organization responds proportionately instead of treating everything as either trivial or catastrophic. Communication planning is another central part of preparation, and it is often underestimated until a real incident exposes how many people need timely and accurate information. During an incident, responders need technical communication so they can share findings and coordinate actions, but the organization also needs business communication so leaders can make decisions about operations, customers, public messaging, and legal obligations. If communication paths are vague, people may rely on rumor, incomplete status updates, or outdated assumptions, which can make the situation far worse. Preparation should therefore identify internal contacts, external contacts, escalation channels, backup communication methods, and the circumstances under which executives, regulators, law enforcement, customers, vendors, or insurers may need to be informed. This is especially important because incidents often disrupt ordinary systems, meaning the organization may need alternate ways to coordinate if email, collaboration tools, or certain networks are no longer reliable. A strong response capability also depends on knowing what the organization is trying to protect and how its environment is put together. Preparation is much harder when teams do not have a reliable understanding of critical assets, major business processes, important data locations, system owners, trusted connections, or operational dependencies between applications and infrastructure. In a real incident, responders may need to decide quickly whether a system can be isolated, whether a service can be taken offline, or whether doing so would interrupt something essential to the business. Those decisions are much safer and faster when the organization has already invested in asset inventories, data classification, ownership records, and dependency mapping. For ISACA students, this highlights a recurring principle across many topics. Good cybersecurity depends on knowing the environment, because controlled decisions become weak and reactive when the organization lacks a clear picture of what it has, how it is used, and what matters most. Another major element of preparation is evidence readiness, because incident response is not just about stopping harm, but also about understanding what happened. If logging is incomplete, clocks are not synchronized, records are not retained long enough, or teams do not know how to preserve information properly, then the organization may struggle to reconstruct the event after the initial confusion passes. That can affect technical recovery, legal strategy, regulatory reporting, insurance claims, internal accountability, and long-term lessons learned. Preparation, therefore, includes deciding what data should be collected, how reliable it is, who can access it, and how it will be protected from accidental loss or alteration during a response effort. A beginner does not need to become a forensic specialist to see why this matters, because even a simple question such as how the attacker got in can become difficult to answer if the organization waited until the crisis to think about whether the right evidence would even exist. Playbooks and procedural guides are another practical part of planning, especially in organizations that want to respond consistently across different kinds of incidents. A playbook is a focused guide that outlines how the organization intends to approach a specific scenario, such as ransomware, phishing-related account compromise, suspicious data transfer, or a lost device containing sensitive information. The point is not to force every incident into a rigid script, because real situations always contain surprises, but to reduce delay by giving responders a common starting point and a shared decision path. Good playbooks help teams remember important actions, identify key contacts, and avoid basic mistakes when people are tired or under pressure. For audit purposes, the presence of playbooks can show that planning has moved beyond a generic document and into scenario-based preparation that reflects the risks the organization is actually most likely to face. Training and exercising are where planning begins to prove whether it is real. A written plan can look impressive and still fail badly if the people expected to use it have never practiced their roles, never worked through decision points, and never tested the communication paths that the document assumes will work. Tabletop exercises are especially valuable because they allow leaders, technical staff, and support functions to walk through a realistic scenario, discuss how they would react, and identify gaps before a real incident forces those same choices under live conditions. These exercises often reveal surprising weaknesses, such as unclear authority, outdated contact lists, unrealistic expectations about recovery speed, or confusion about who should speak to outside parties. For beginners, this is an important insight because preparation is not measured by how complete the document looks, but by whether people can use the plan effectively when uncertainty, pressure, and time constraints are working against them. Third-party involvement is another area where preparation can either strengthen response or create serious complications. Many organizations depend on cloud providers, software vendors, managed service firms, outside counsel, cyber insurance carriers, and specialized investigators, and these relationships can become critical when an incident expands beyond internal capabilities. Preparation should therefore clarify what external support exists, how to reach it, what contractual expectations apply, what evidence-sharing rules must be followed, and what the organization can realistically expect in terms of speed and scope of assistance. Without that clarity, responders may lose valuable time trying to determine who is responsible for what, whether the vendor is obligated to help, or whether certain actions require prior approval or notification. From a CISA perspective, this reinforces the broader governance lesson that outsourced services do not remove accountability, because the organization still remains responsible for planning around those dependencies and understanding the risks they introduce. Legal, regulatory, and privacy considerations also shape incident preparation, even when the root event seems highly technical at first. Some incidents involve personal data, protected records, contractual obligations, or sector-specific rules that affect what must be documented, when notifications must occur, and how evidence should be handled. If those considerations are ignored until the middle of the response, the organization may create avoidable exposure by delaying required actions, communicating inaccurately, or failing to preserve records that later become important. Preparation helps by identifying who should advise on these matters, when their involvement becomes necessary, and how legal or privacy requirements fit into the broader response process without paralyzing technical action. A beginner should take away that incident response is never just a technology matter, because the consequences often extend into reputation, compliance, customer trust, and business continuity in ways that make cross-functional readiness essential. All of this planning works best when it is tied to review, maintenance, and continuous improvement rather than treated as a one-time project. Business environments change, systems are added, people move into new roles, vendors come and go, and threat patterns shift, which means a response plan that was useful 2 years ago may now contain wrong assumptions, missing contacts, or outdated priorities. Preparation, therefore, includes periodic review, revision after exercises, updates after real incidents, and measurement of whether the organization is becoming more coordinated and resilient over time. Auditors often pay attention to this because stale plans can give leadership a false sense of readiness while hiding practical weaknesses that will only appear during a real emergency. By the time you step back and look at the whole subject, the main point becomes clear. Security incident response planning and preparation are about building clarity before confusion arrives, so that when an incident does occur, the organization is not starting from fear and improvisation, but from shared roles, tested assumptions, reliable information, and a disciplined path toward effective action.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.